Hello, everyone. I'm Ross Brown, Vice President of Product Marketing for Oracle Cloud Infrastructure. And I'm happy to welcome you guys to the ARM Dev Summit and to the Oracle and Ampere session, where today we're going to be joined by Oracle and Ampere executives to talk about the Oracle Ampere A1 compute shapes and how that ARM service we're providing in the cloud in conjunction with Ampere is bringing new opportunities for developers. As we've launched this service a couple of months ago, we've had a pretty strong reaction in the marketplace that's been positive and encouraging. But we will talk about some futures today and talk about some changes and things that might come in the future. As such, it is covered by our safe harbor statement. So while we intend to release all the stuff you hear in the roadmap today, things change. So for contractual purposes, treat this as a discussion on futures and a general direction, but not a commitment. With that, today I'd like to welcome Dan Garrity, the SVP of Developer Services for Oracle Cloud, Matt Leonard, VP of Compute, as well as Jeff Whittick, Chief Product Officer at Ampere. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ross. Glad to be here.
So ARM has been growing really fast. As you look, you see it kind of everywhere between small IoT devices and mobile devices and now laptops and into the server. Dan, can you talk a little bit about what developers are seeing in ARM and why it's an exciting platform for us going forward?
Sure, Ross. You're right. Everyone is seeing ARM everywhere, mobile devices, IoT. And why is that? That's because of all the special capabilities that we find in RISC architectures, reduced instruction set computing, where we can design for specific functions. So originally the rise of ARM on mobile devices because of low power consumption. Now we have the opportunity to kind of set aside all the complexities of the old architectures, build a new architecture specifically for the cloud, and that's what we've done with this Ampere system. Not only do we have the Ampere and the ARM system ready for people to use, but we also have a rich ecosystem now where people can actually develop and port their applications over to the new architecture.
Yeah, that's great. Building that ecosystem is obviously key to getting adoption and whatnot. So Matt, you run our compute service and deal with the hardware side of things. So before we dive into what developers can do with it, can we talk a little bit about your experience of bringing ARM into the Oracle Cloud and how we are delivering it to customers?
Sure. Well, building on Dan's point, we wanted to give customers options. So the question for us was, how do we accelerate the industry momentum that's been started over the last few years with ARM? We want to make sure that everyone has full access to the power of ARM and the Ampere Ultra processor. So in April of 2021, we announced our new OCI shape, the Ampere A1, based on the Ampere Ultra processor. That comes in a variety of different shapes. Most specifically, we have a bare metal and we have virtual machines. Our bare metal, they take full advantage of the maximum performance. It's 160 single-threaded cores, up to 3 gigahertz with a terabyte of RAM. The other important one is our VM and our Flex shapes. And I know, Ross, you want to talk about Flex in a little bit, but what Flex is it allows you to scale from 1 to 80 cores with 1 to 64 gigabyte memory per core. So you can right-size your ARM workload. And then the last big thing was we introduced the first penny core in the cloud, right? So we wanted to make the price something that was available and reachable for all users. So they could get up and running. And so, talking to our customers, what we're hearing from them is 3 reasons why they're choosing the A1. Predictable performance. As you scale up workloads, you see completely linear scaling on the CPU relative to x86. You've kind of eliminated that noisy neighbor effect. Improved security by removing core sharing on, you lower that vulnerability to side channel attacks. And then lastly, that price performance, right? Like when you start with a penny core and the outstanding performance that we're seeing on the Ultra A1, it's a very compelling price performance relative to some of the x86 workloads. In order to make that more accessible as well, though, we started off with industry-leading free tier program. So our always free tier, it comes with 4 cores and 24 gigabyte of memory. You can do a lot with that. It's enough to set up a Kubernetes cluster with a control plane and 2 node pools. So there's a lot that you can run, and the feedback that we're hearing from customers is overwhelming to the point we literally are having a hard time keeping the A1s on the shelf. And so, it's a pretty compelling message from our customers that they're excited to build on top of the ARM platform.
Yeah, I know it's really hard for Jeff to hear that. It's really hard for Jeff to hear that we've incredible demand for his brand new server platform. Go ahead.
Yeah, if I may, Ross, can I just piggyback on the free tier? Because Oracle really does have really the only free tier that actually works in the industry, all the cloud service providers. And I would say a key part of that is this Ampere offering. And, where else can you get 4 cores, 24 gigs of RAM, and virtually unlimited bandwidth? And also all the tools that you need. We've optimized Oracle Linux to run with it. We've got Graal VM to run with it, Oracle DB, of course, MySQL, Oracle Kubernetes Engine, and all of these tools are optimized to run on this platform.
As the marketing guy in a room full of developers and engineers, it's always great when I see a free tier come out that people can actually experience real work in the cloud and not just trial demo work. Standing up a very small service as a way to experience the console is certainly important, but experiencing ARM is the goal here, and getting developers to try stuff and creating a free tier that's big enough for them to try actual work that can go into production and then seamlessly move into a production workload, I think is really a good offer for developers. But moving into that production workload, I think, Matt, you've done some stuff beyond penny core as a way to get there in terms of getting the cost to exactly what people are consuming. Can you talk a little bit about Flex VMs and how we're delivering the A1 shape?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the things that we're a little bit differentiated on is how we think about cloud and how we right size your cloud relative to your workload. So, if you hark back to the days of the data center, a traditional on-premise data center is relatively inflexible, right? You have to buy a long way ahead. Your buying cycles in terms of data center space, and then your servers are relatively inflexible. You operate off capital budget, and it results in a lot of wasted compute, storage, and networking resources. So early in the cloud evolution, we were promised elasticity, right? But really, like first generation cloud is nothing more than a slightly more elastic version of your on-premise data center. Effectively, you still design for your peak. And you have a little bit more elasticity in terms of like time to launch new resources. But generally speaking, it's still relatively inflexible. So in OCI, our approach to flexible computing started with what we call flex computing. And we touched on this a little bit, but with one core, you can scale your memory to core ratio. We've seen customers do all sorts of interesting things, from compute intensive workloads to memory optimized workloads that allow them to reshape the amount of compute resources they're consuming relative to their workload. And just finishing up that last slide for a second, where we want to go with that in the future is that we can dynamically scale that core to memory ratio in order to perfectly right size the amount of compute resources that you're consuming as you move along. And so that's going to make your choices when you're running in the cloud a lot more flexible and ensure that you actually pay for what you need as your workload elastically changes throughout a day rather than paying for these fixed shapes. Okay, we can bounce into that next one now if you like. So, when we look at the A1 shape and people say to me, well, like, what is it good for? Well, the reality is it's actually good for a ton of things, right? We positioned it as a general purpose workload, good for things like web application servers, container-based workloads. But with Flex, you can actually change the shape of it from a general purpose to a compute intensive. So if you're doing things like media encoding or encryption and decryption, AI inferencing, with Flex, you can dial up your core to memory ratio and have that performance that you need for that specialty workload. The flip side of that is you can go the other way. If you have an in-memory database, which requires a high amount of RAM relative to your CPU, then with flex computing, you can change the shape of that. Just picking on AWS for a second, one flex shape fits 39 shapes on AWS today because you basically can configure that A1 shape to fit the workload that you're running on it.
That's great. So, Matt, I know that launching this service has been a journey from going from a brand new compute supplier with Ampere and then going through a chip shortage globally between both companies and trying to get it out there. But I know it's been a really good partnership. Jeff, I want to turn to you and talk a little bit about Ampere's goal with ARM, how you guys are supporting the developer ecosystem, and what you guys think about the Oracle partnership.
Yeah, thanks, Ross. Yeah, at Ampere, we've really set out to build what's next in cloud computing. And having a partner like Oracle, who's been through that transition to x86 in the data center and then now into ARM-based CPUs in the data center, it's really been a perfect match. There's always been something that's next, and Ampere is that next step today for developers with our Ampere Ultra ARM-based CPUs. And Oracle's really embraced Ampere Ultra with the Ampere A1 compute instances. It's really been a joy working with Matt and the entire Oracle team to enable a premier cloud native developer environment. And as a developer, you want performance that you can depend on without needing to worry about what other users are running in the data center that you happen to be using. You want elasticity to scale up when user demand increases without having to worry about whether that extra capacity you're purchasing is really resulting in more compute. And you want a power efficient service so you can feel good about the choice that you're making about your cloud partner. So the OCI Ampere A1 offering, it's really a no-brainer if you're developing for or you're running anything that's cloud native. You get that predictable performance with OCPUs that are full cores without having any sibling threads running that can steal resources from you. And the OCI Ampere A1 compute offers customer diversity, choice. Matt talked about being able to scale up the compute, memory, network resources as needed. And Ampere Ultra is able to deliver that linear scalability from the A1 Flex VMs all the way up to the full 160 core bare metal shapes.
Well, we really appreciate the partnership. It's been a great experience bringing a whole new compute surface into our customer base and giving them an opportunity. I know you guys have been doing a lot on maturing the ecosystem around it as well, along with us and independently. Can you talk a little bit about the solutions portal and things you guys are doing to help embrace the ecosystem?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as both Dan and Matt mentioned earlier, we've been collaborating a lot together between Ampere and Oracle on maturing that software ecosystem, whether that's at the OS level, whether it's with the VM layer and hypervisors, whether it's with programming languages like Java, or if it's application porting for end users or internal services. Really, when we look at it, there's two key categories of users. With over 180 billion ARM chips produced and out there, ARM's already the most widely used instruction set architecture, and it's the ISA that's produced in the largest quantity. So it's already the de facto standard at the edge. There's a massive developer community already for ARM native applications. So now with OCI's Ampere A1 instances, they now have a true cloud native home for end-to-end development and for deployments. And then the second class of users is those that are looking at the performance of Ampere Ultra and really excited to get out there on something new. So there's a rapidly growing base of cloud native developers that are looking to write, test, run their applications on processors that were really built for the cloud with that consistency and scalability that they demand versus running on legacy processors that were created before the cloud even emerged. And the Oracle Ampere A1 Solutions Portal that provides the links, resources, references on a variety of software solutions running on Ampere Ultra. So if you're new getting started on an ARM-based CPU in the cloud, you can head over to the solutions portal and easily see what applications run, what OSs, tools that you're used to, what runs, and really get kickstarted there.
That's fantastic. And this notion of being able to run ARM from cloud to edge for as a cloud provider is really attractive to me because there's a growing compute opportunity around feed the edge, and being able to do that with ARM is a great way to get there. So
yeah,
Dan,
exactly. Being able to run the same processor both at the edge and in the cloud is super valuable and just really increases performance and makes it easy to get up and running and move it into production.
And just a quick
that's
plug
great.
there, we have the A1 available in every region that OCI is in today, and as we rapidly expand our footprint, we're going to continue with that strategy, making it available.
Global availability, right? So Dan, one of the challenges for developers with any new service is how you go from the unfamiliar to the familiar to feeling competent to now it's kind of just your muscle memory, it's fluidity. How are we helping developers embrace ARM and the tools around it?
Yeah. So, I mean, having all the great hardware in the world is great and hypervisors and all that, but at the end of the day, you got to run your software stack on it. And we've invested quite a bit, actually, together in making sure that this ecosystem is there. The ecosystem has been there for mobile developers and edge developers, so that's kind of a known quantity. But when you want to take your server application and make it run predictably in a scalable fashion on an ARM server, you've got a few things to try out. So first of all, we've made it really easy to try. And again, I come back to the free tier, where we really have a generous free tier offering. I mean, sign up for an Oracle account, and basically you've got a free powerful computer at your disposal. And so we make it easy to kind of get started. We've got a developer image that you can, when you launch your hardware, you can launch it with all the developer tools, all the compilers, all the runtimes, all the Java, GraalVM, all the things that you need to rebuild your app for this ARM architecture and really check it out, check out the performance and so forth. Then once you start your journey, we've got the ability to embrace the processor, pulling from all the Oracle Yum repos. We've got ARC64 images in the marketplace. We've got GraalVM, which if you don't know what that is, it's an optimized Java VM. We've got that running. So you've really got the tools that you need to really push the performance envelope. And then we also have put all the resources together for you in one place. If you Google ARM and Oracle, you'll find it. You can also look for it on developer.oracle.com. And then I think importantly, if those 4 core CPUs isn't enough for you and you want to try to do something bigger with ARM and you're getting started, we have a really interesting accelerator program actually that Matt and his team have put together where if you have a real need to have some more, you can apply to this program and you can get even more compute free while you expand your offering and try out the new features. So it's easy to try, it's easy to get started. We've got all the tools that you need to move your application to ARM and watch it fly.
And I know our teams have created a tremendous amount of content that is out there for folks beyond the, as you mentioned, searching on Google. Between the Oracle infrastructure blog and the developer blogs, there's no shortage of ARM and Ampere content for developers to take advantage of. Can you talk a little bit
Yeah.
about some of the specific partnerships that we have?
Yeah, great lead in because I did forget to mention all these partnerships that we have. I mean, specifically with GitLab and Jenkins and Datadog and Nginx, Jenny Mobile, OnSpecta, and SUSE Rancher. These are really premier development tools that have partnered with us to make sure that they run perfectly on the ARM architecture on the Ampere A1 offering. So
Right.
we're really excited about these partnerships, and there's a lot more you can read about them and participate in those as well online.
Yeah, I think that dual approach you guys have taken of Oracle on ARM and porting our own technologies, like you mentioned, like Java and GraalVM and all those other things, and then the world of open source on ARM and the ARM Accelerator is a great way to bring a complete set of services into it. Now, I know the Accelerator has some specific program benefits and stuff. Matt and Jeff, do you want to share with folks a little bit of details around the Accelerator?
Sure. I can probably start and then I'll pass off to you, Jeff. So like the ARM Accelerator really was our commitment to the developer community in order to kind of help with the adoption of, ARM technologies in the cloud. And so it was intended like primarily for like open source projects and kind of ISV starting to get off the ground. And so we've had lots of interesting applicants that are working with it. Now, when you apply for the ARM Accelerator program, it doesn't just give you ARM credit, right? It gives you Oracle Cloud credit. And so you can basically take advantage of any of the services that we offer on OCI, building on top of the ARM platform. And so today you can get thousands of dollars of credit running on OCI, and we'll work with you and partner you. And if you need more in order to do more, like great, work with us, and we'll be happy to like help you get started.
That's fantastic. So
Yeah,
just to
and
recap,
yeah.
go ahead, Jeff. You go ahead.
I just want to say, yeah, this has been a really, really valuable tool from Ampere perspective as well. Going back early in the year, we were reached out to by a lot of end users, developers. Getting them a physical server is not only complicated, but it's oftentimes not what somebody really wants sitting in their office. So it's been great to be able to refer people over to the Accelerator program, really get them started on ARM-based processors like Ampere's with cloud servers that can do real work. Built on Ampere servers and then delivered by Oracle.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, Jeff. If just to recap from the marketing guy's perspective, we've got a incredible new high performance service, a free tier you could do actual work on, an accelerator program for being able to port and move open source and other projects over to it, global availability of the shape, flexible shapes that fit what everyone needs. So the last two things I think we just need to cap off on, just because we're all talking to developers, let's talk about the use cases where ARM really shines. What are the apps and industries that you see a natural fit to help people figure out where should they explore first in terms of great benefits?
Yeah,
Oh,
so
I
I
can.
think I'll jump in really quickly there on that one. I mean, I think that we've been talking a lot about cloud native. We've been talking a lot about the overall developer environment, and I think that really, and anyone who's developing cloud native applications, really for the wide variety of workloads, whether it's for web servers, AI inferencing, whether it's databases, data analysis. Really this fits the requirements for any of those things. It's about anything where
Right.
you need great agility, great scalability.
I think that's a key message I wanted to make sure landed for the audience, is that this is a broad general platform, not just mobile development, not just IoT edge, not those things, but core compute capabilities and core workloads executing in it. Dan?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry, Dan.
I was just going to. Obviously, containers are, growing like crazy. Containers being a key part of the cloud native computing foundation. Kubernetes, of course, being the way to orchestrate those things, those workloads. And the key thing about the whole performance of the Ampere product is this sort of single core, single process. Everything's all in one. So basically, the scale, as you mentioned, there's no noisy neighbor problem. So when you're running Kubernetes and Kubernetes is doing the orchestration on your behalf, it knows how to scale perfectly. And I think that running Kubernetes and running containers on top of an ARM architecture is really the way to go. So what we say, again, echoing, any cloud native application is going to run beautifully on this platform.
Yeah, and just
And
dovetailing on that, Ross. Yeah, sorry. Hopefully this time. When people ask me what can you do with the A1, the initial answer was, well, you can do a lot with it, right? Like we said earlier, it's a general purpose, work engine. But we've seen all sorts of interesting use cases, from like earthquake modeling, HPC workloads, to like AI ML workloads doing object detection and avoidance, like real time like frame sharing. We've done live streaming of sports events. The variety of use cases that'll run on the A1 is kind of endless, right? Like, come and try it out. It's a great platform.
Yeah.
great.
I
So
guess
I
one
mentioned there was a
last
lot.
thing, just
Go ahead.
the instruction set, the way that it supports vectors, the way that it can support, for example, all the TLS protocols, all the encryption, decryption, all the crypto operations that you want to do, basically built in, and not only built in, but also predictable. And so that gives you a much better way to do any kind of encryption, decryption, video feeds, media, that kind of thing. Plus, you couple that with the way Oracle prices its network egress, and you get quite a
Very low.
value for anybody moving data out of the cloud.
Well, we've certainly seen the marketplace respond. So thank you for everyone in the ARM Dev Summit who has tried our Ampere service. I really appreciate you coming out and trying the free tier and also the production tier. I guess the last thing we should close on is how people can get started. And so there's a couple of ways to get started with Oracle and the Ampere A1 compute. First, you can go to obviously a couple of sites that we've loaded up the free tier, as well as the developer tools, as well as the accelerator. So you can find all the developer resources at the developer.oracle.com/ARM URL. And of course, signing up for the free tier is all over our website, but the URL is there. And then lastly, if you're interested in the ARM Accelerator, please go to the URL and join the ARM Accelerator program and submit your ideas so that we can help build out the ARM community broadly on the Oracle Cloud Platform for developers. Dan, Jeff, and Matt, thank you all for your time, and I appreciate everyone who attended the session. If you have any follow-up questions, feel free to reach out to Oracle, and we'll be happy to engage with you. Thanks all.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ross.
Thanks.